I wrote this book about my personal conversations with African leaders to try and demonstrate why Africa has remained behind the rest of the world. In the 1960s, most of the African countries were well ahead of the Southeast Asian countries like Korea, Singapore, Hong Kong, Indonesia, Malaysia. And over the years, Southeast Asian countries have surged ahead. They've had fabulous growth. They call them the Asian tigers. Whereas the Africans, despite all the assistance they've received and money and what have you, have really not done very well. In fact, and many of them have gone backwards. So the question is, what happened? And I decided that it's not just policy. It's just sort of all sorts of background reasons. While we were working to bring a development, the African leaders, the original generation, the ones I've talked to in this book, have other priorities. They wanted to keep their countries independent, and some of them were worried that they might be taken over. They wanted to stay in power. They wanted to keep the city people happy. They couldn't care less about the rural people. And they were all kind of frightened people who did not wake up in the morning every day and saying, how am I going to help develop my people? They didn't think about that. They were thinking about other things. So our priority of development was kind of stymied, despite all the money that we put into these countries and all the education we gave and health services and what have you. And I figured that it needs to be known why all of this happened, because we're continuing to do this in Africa. And the question is, can we get the next generation of African leaders to think differently? And I think it's happening slowly. And I hope to contribute to that with this expose of what the first generation was thinking about.